Farmweek is a production of the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
Today on Farm Week, the Environmental Protection Agency updates its pesticide handling rules for farm workers.
In the food factor, hot and thirsty, find out when to drink water and when to use a sports drink.
In Southern Gardening, see how this home gardener created some rusty pockets in his landscape.
In the markets this week, a potential for soybean prices to fall back. One analyst offers advice, while some unexpected cattle numbers provide a positive note for the beef sector.
In the feature segment, it's the start of our 39th season on Farm Week. Today you'll see the first feature story that aired in 1977. This 81-year-old cattle woman will amaze you.
My lawyer said when my husband died nearly 11 years ago for me to make no changes. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I mean for you to make no changes. I said, what I'm going to do with all those black Angus cows that my husband has bought that we have. He said, you're going to keep them. You know as much about it as he did.
Good day, everyone. I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Artis Ford. Welcome to Farm Week.
This weekend, a milestone for Farm Week. We'll celebrate 38 years on the air and the launch of our 39th season on Mississippi Public Broadcasting.
Leighton, here are some of the numbers. We first came on the air October 3rd, 1977. So far, today, 1,932 shows. So,
amazing.
Amazing. What? Bonanza was only 20 years. Gunsmoke only 20 years on the air. Bonanza 14. MASH 11. But we thank you for viewing all these years, because if you didn't watch, we would have been gone a long time ago.
And I don't think anybody could imagine the importance of video as technology advanced, and now we have phones in our pockets.
Video's everywhere.
That's right. It's more important than ever.
I'd also like to thank the crew here at the University Television Center of Mississippi State University for all that they've done for us, and the folks down at Mississippi Public Broadcasting.
And I don't think we could ever imagine we would one day have a set like this.
And a set like this. It's just great.
Thanks, Artis. Well, we start off our news segment today with word that the Environmental Protection Agency has released its revisions to the 1992 Agricultural Worker Protection Standard, also known as the WPS. Family farms are exempt from the WPS, but not other commercial operations. Mandatory training for farm workers is now yearly, increased from the present once every 5 years requirement. Trainers must be certified applicators, state-approved trainers, or EPA-trained trainers. Training records must now be kept for 2 years. Children under age 18 are prohibited from handling pesticides. Training must also include instructions on how to reduce family exposure from pesticides on farm worker clothing. The majority of the rule revisions will be effective 14 months after the rule publishes in the Federal Register. That date has not been determined at this time. This will give EPA and states time to develop updated materials and enforcement strategies.
Well, let's check in now on the weekly crop and weather report from the Mississippi Ag Statistics Service in Jackson. This report reflects conditions as of Sunday. Now, the rain, we don't normally want it during harvest, but some crops like peanuts and sweet potatoes, they actually need moist soil to prevent yield and quality loss. So as you look at topsoil moisture in the state, surplus in 2% of the state, adequate 21%. Now, this does not include the rain that has fallen this week, but 40% of the state had short soil moisture as of Sunday, 32% very short. I do know down in Smith County, where all my people are from, just very dry down there. As you look in terms of the harvest, Mississippi corn harvest almost complete, 96% complete as of September 27th, and that is on the 5-year average for the state. We look at cotton, running a little behind average, 16% complete as of Sunday. Peanuts running ahead of average, although that dry weather does hurt because it pulls the peanuts off the vines, causes quality problems. 32% complete as of the 27th. Mississippi rice, 76% complete, running about on average, just a little ahead. Mississippi soybeans running ahead of average, 59% complete on the harvest as of Sunday. Mississippi sweet potatoes, though, running behind. Lack of soil moisture causes the potatoes to skin, lowers their quality. So people are waiting for rains anyway. Only 28% complete as of September 27th, when normally at this date they're almost half through.
Have you ever wondered what's the best way to keep hydrated while working, exercising, or playing sports? In this week's episode of The Food Factor, Natasha Haynes with Mississippi State University Extension tells you when to pick up a sports drink and when water is the better option.
Sports drinks are popular. They are made to rehydrate and keep your energy levels high. But the real question is, do you really need a sports drink? Not always. Sports drinks are recommended only to increase your physical performance if you are physically active for more than 60 to 90 minutes. Anything less, and water should be the drink of choice. Drink fluids before, during, and after physical activity. Drink 2 cups of fluid to replace every pound of body weight loss. Don't wait until you feel thirsty. You may already be dehydrated. Keep a bottle of water with you and take water breaks every 10 to 15 minutes. When drinking a sports drink, be careful about how many calories you may be consuming. Avoid highly caffeinated drinks. Try milk or fruit juice. They contain carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals not found in all sports drinks. Try making your own sports drinks with simple ingredients such as coconut water and watermelon or lemon juice. It costs much less, doesn't have as many additives, and it tastes just as good. You can find recipes for refreshing homemade sports drinks on our Pinterest page at Mississippi State University Extension Service. It's time to make healthy food a factor in your life.
Natasha says whenever you're in doubt about what to drink after physical activity, you can't go wrong with water.
Plants are the first thing to come to mind when you're landscaping, but what about a favorite collection? In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Extension horticulturist Dr. Gary Bachman will show us one homeowner who combines his love of old farm relics and colorful garden plants.
Some homeowners just have that eye for creating landscapes from repurposed materials. A great example is my friend Reggie, who collects old farm relics and has fashioned a garden with rusty pockets of color. Reggie has arranged his collection underneath a stand of pines that creates a soft and dappled shade. The combination of plants in this old wooden tool chest is a magnificent mix of textures. I really like the coarse textured leaves of the red and green red flash caladium and the wild and crazy mojito elephant ear with its medium green leaves with dark purple flecks. And look at the beautiful flowers of Sun Patience compact blush pink, which have a sparkling iridescence. Rounding out this combination planting are Versa lime green coleus and fine textured straight and narrow blue arrow juncus. Reggie has a couple of really interesting abandoned plow implements. One he has adorned with a planter containing radiant red flowering bronze leaf begonia with the blue arrow juncus. The other plow I think is the most fun in the shade garden. The planter contains the green and purple oyster plant and the blue-green foliage of firewitch dianthus, plus a delicately balanced old shoe and ancient fuel can. But I wonder what happened to the other shoe. This used wash tub is a great example of unusual plant combinations. A colorful mix of flowering vinca is complemented with green and white moonstruck hosta and variegated spider plant, with the little spiders hanging over the edge reaching for the ground. Reggie shows us it's a great idea to be creative with repurposed materials and craft colorful pockets in your landscape. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Layton, Gary says the more resistant your yard art, the better. Longer it will last, but don't worry. If it shows the effect of the weather, that looks good, and weathered yard art has a beauty all its own. Well, in our feature segment today, we're celebrating the beginning of our 39th season on Farm Week. You'll see the first feature story to air on the first Farm Week broadcast in 1977. Time now for the markets with Leighton. And Leighton, you say the main feature of the week was the quarterly grain stocks report?
That's right, Artis. A lot of positioning going on ahead of those numbers that came out Wednesday at midday. In our headlines this week, at least one analyst says it's time to sell soybeans. U.S. catfish sales are up compared to a year ago, while the cattle sector ponders some all-time low numbers. Chinese buyers have signed agreements to buy over $5 billion worth of U.S. soybeans. That equates to about 13 million metric tons of beans. Meanwhile, there is the potential for bearish news in this market. Analyst Ted Seifried says there's reason to worry, so selling beans now is not a bad idea.
The idea is that soybean prices could go down over time because there's, I think, a lot more potential bearish news for soybeans with harvest or with yields coming in a little bit better than expected. The potential is that we could be near where the USDA is on production. I get a little worried about soybean prices sliding lower after an initial harvest bump. So in that respect, yes, I do like that idea. I would sell them and then maybe own some fairly inexpensive calls to re-own those bushels if we do get a rally, if South America has an issue. But the problem there is basis, because you're really selling into the worst basis possible. Right. But you're going to have that same problem with corn. So it's sort of pick your poison. I would like to store corn. Yep. And sell beans off the combine.
Meanwhile, a Midwest specialist has a warning as far as next year's crops. Gary Schnitke says farmers should look at ways to cut $100 an acre in production cost on their rented corn and soybean acres. The management specialist says taking this step for 2016 can help avoid financial problems if low commodity prices continue. New figures reveal the second quarter of the year was tough as far as softwood lumber prices, and not just in the United States, but throughout the world. Traders say the downtrend boils down to weaker demand, ample supply, and a strengthening U.S. dollar. Well, we break for a moment for the trivia quiz here on Farm Week. To transition into the livestock markets, we have a question related to sheep and the fiber they produce. And here's the question: which of the following states is not a top U.S. wool producer? Is the answer California, Texas, Colorado, or Wyoming? Stay with us for the answer.
We're going to pause for a short break on Farm Week. Coming up, we'll look at the calendar and the rest of the markets. Leighton Span reports farm-raised catfish prices have dropped, while the fed cattle supply has tightened in dramatic fashion. In the feature segment today, you'll see the first feature story broadcast on Farm Week. You hope you'll be doing this well when you're 81.
Healthy living, healthy gardening. That's the focus of the 2015 Fall Flower and Garden Fest in Crystal Springs. This annual festival features the latest flower, fruit, and vegetable varieties, expert advice on home gardening and landscaping, as well as guided tours throughout the beautiful demonstration gardens. Be sure to attend the Fall Flower and Garden Fest October 16th and 17th at the MSU Truck Crops Experiment Station in Crystal Springs.
Before we get back to the markets, let's look at the Farm Week calendar. Interested in keeping your water well clean and pure? Well, a water well workshop will take place Tuesday, October 13th in Copiah County. The location is the Copiah County Extension Office in Hazelhurst on West Gallman Road. The hours are 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. You'll learn about how to test your well water and how to protect your well from contamination. Mississippi farmers can learn the latest about forage management on Friday, November 6th in Newton. The 2015 Mississippi Forage and Grassland Council Annual Conference will take place at the Coastal Plain Branch Experiment Station of Mississippi State University. That's on Coastal Plain Road, east of Newton. It gets underway at 8:30 a.m. Register by October 16th, and it will cost less. Subjects to be covered include stocking rates on cool season forages, herbicide trial results, and grazing management systems. Go to our Farm Week website at farmweek.msucares.com for information on these and other events. Now check out this week's Farm Week Snapshot.
Pond-bank catfish prices slide a little more in the latest industry snapshot. This reflects the market for the month of August. U.S. producers received a pond-bank price of $1.16 per pound for premium-size live fish. Now that is down a nickel a pound from a year ago. Farm sales were up 8%, almost reaching 26 million pounds round weight. Processor sales for August topped 12 million pounds, which was an increase of 6.1% from August 2014. New numbers from the beef sector still indicate a tight supply situation as far as available cattle in the U.S. This is the focus of our market interview this week. Extension ag economist Brian Williams has been looking over the cattle on feed report, and one number did seem to stand out to the trade, right?
Yeah, we saw one number that was way outside of expectations. The placement number came in at 1.63 million head, which was about 5.4% below a year ago, and it was 18% below the 5-year average.
And I understand that was actually like the smallest placements number in the history of the cattle on feed report?
It was. Dating back to 1996, it was the smallest number for the month of August that we had.
So that figure, I would assume, would be considered at least somewhat positive by the market, right?
Yeah, the figure, the number itself is definitely considered positive, but when we look at the markets, we saw them come up for a couple of days, but then they kind of bounce back down and continue their downward trend.
All right, well, let's move on to another figure in that report, the marketings number. Tell us about that one.
Well, marketings came in basically exactly where they were expected. As far as the numbers, they were down just over 6% from a year ago. And like placements, that was also an all-time low since 1996 for the month of August. But again, it wasn't really too far outside of where we were expecting.
And the final component of this monthly report, the actual number of cattle on feed, let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was down 2.75% from a year ago. That was a little bit lower than expected. We were actually expecting it to be up slightly, up about 0.3%.
So overall, how would you size up this latest on-feed report as far as the cattle trade?
Well, overall, the report was bullish, particularly with the placements being so far below what we were expecting. But the market really didn't reflect that. There's other things that are really playing into the market. For example, exports haven't been real strong because the dollar is real strong. We're also ending the summer grilling season, and we're all the cattle are going to markets right now, coming off of the cows.
And any spin-off or effect on feeder cattle with this? Still kind of uncertainty there as far as the future?
Well, there's some uncertainty there, but what I would expect looking forward to watch for is, with all these replacements, there were all these cattle that weren't placed, sometime down the road they're probably going to go in. So I would expect to see them maybe going in later in the next month or two.
And back to the trivia quiz to wrap things up for this week in the markets. And our right answer is B. Texas is not a top wool producer. California, Colorado, and Wyoming are the top 3 states.
Well, as you heard earlier, this week marks Farmweek's 38th anniversary and the start of our 39th season on the air. The feature that you'll see next appeared on that first show. The subject set the standard for the feature stories that have followed through the years. It's about Lillian Thornton of Raymond. She raised registered Angus cattle and did it at an age when most are long retired. She was 81 years old at the time of Farmweek's first visit. Farmweek's first host, Bruce Johnson, introduces her. This story was shot originally on film, so its quality won't be quite up to today's standards.
A little while ago, we visited with an 81-year-old woman who lives just south of Jackson near Raymond. Not only does Mrs. Lillian Thornton get around more like a woman half her age, but she also operates by herself a livestock farm. We think you'll enjoy getting to know her.
I grew up on a farm with 12 of us, 9 boys and 3 girls, and I must have learned a great deal about some forms of farming, especially cotton farming at that time, and so it hasn't seemed too hard for me. My lawyer said when my husband died nearly 11 years ago for me to make no changes. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I mean for you to make no changes. I said, what I'm going to do with all those black Angus cows that my husband has bought that we have. He said, you're going to keep them. You know as much about it as he did. And I did. So I did keep them, and that, I think, has really meant almost the salvation of my life and my mind, because I was so busy I didn't have time to maybe grieve like I would have. I'm 81. I guess you might say I've been farming about nearly 11 years since my husband died. If I'm going to farm, I have no one to help. Therefore, I have to do whatever comes to be done. It matters not what it is. I have to find a way if I don't know how. I build my own gates. I hang them. I have a circular saw that I saw all the parts, measure all parts for a gate. Saw them all here at the house where I have electricity. Carry them to the place that I'm going to hang it. Build the gate and then hang it by way of lifts, maybe tubs, or concrete blocks or whatever, till I have nailed the hinges on and hang it. My husband had all of the fencing done before he died, but there's always breaks of one kind and another, and I repair. I have a stretcher, and usually I don't have to use a stretcher. I use 2 hammers most times to repair. I have black Angus cattle, purebred, registered. I usually keep 100 head of cattle, but I've recently sold 67 head because they haven't been worth too much. And all of the years until last year, I've had to pay income tax on what I've made on my cattle, because I'd sell some of them for breeding purposes and others to buyers whom I know. And so I have done that. But I felt that maybe I better just kind of cut down. I have only 36 now, and I'm just keeping those to kind of see whether the price goes up or whether they don't. And I raise my hay. I have 16 acres that I have cut every year for hay, and I usually get from 1,500 to 2,000 bales of hay, and that's enough for my cattle that I keep. I have a large barn that my husband made troughs all the way through, and they're big enough to hold just one bale of hay after another. I have the hay stacked back of the troughs, and I just lift those 65 and 70-pound bales over into that trough one by one until I have enough to feed as many cows as I have. I raise a garden. I would guess it's at least a fifth of an acre, and sometimes when I'm working it, I'm sure it's a half acre. I've had to water it consistently. Luckily, I have a lake up over where my garden is. And that pipe, I stop up one end at the garden with a stick with a rag wrapped around it. Then I go up to the levee and I fill the pipe, the lead pipe, with water. Usually takes about 6 or 8 gallons to fill it. And then I stick a stick with a rag on it in that and keep it very tight until I wade down into the lake and put that under water with a rock on it, and then pull out the stick with the rag in it. Then I go back to the garden and pull the stick out there, and I have a great big inch of water coming out, and then I take pipes and put to the lead pipe, just shave them off and stick them in and water the whole garden. Whatever you have to do, you have to do if you have a farm. If you don't know how to do it, you have to learn.
And you can watch this story again on our Farmweek website, our Facebook page, or YouTube. The website address is farmweek.msucares.com. Now, Leighton, let me remind viewers that she was 81 years old at the time that she appeared on Farmweek. Mrs. Thornton's son-in-law, Benton Kane of Jackson, told me that Mrs. Thornton kept the cattle several years after Farm Week's visit. She passed away at the age of 93, 12 years after we visited her. And she was ahead of her time. What? She had Angus when Angus weren't cool.
Black cattle, yeah.
She was also in the Farm Week Open video for many years, and we would have people ask us, who is the lady, the older woman that's lifting those hay bales? She was just an extraordinary person.
I'm sure that farm contributed to that longevity, no doubt.
Oh, no doubt. Well, we are at the end of Farm Week for this week. On our next show, we'll continue to celebrate the start of our 39th season on Farm Week.
We'll be looking back some 35 years at the year 1980 in Mississippi agriculture. We'll give one hint, there's a famous grain embargo involved.
In the food factor, we'll have a new way to cook out. You and your kids will enjoy making your own meals using foil packs.
And fold over the egg.
In Southern Gardening, garden whimsy. Don't be formal, let your imagination go and indulge yourself with some landscape fun.
For the rest of the Farm Week crew, I'm Artist Ford.
And I'm Leighton Spann. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.